Alright, so to begin, I'm just going to show you first how the build is set up, because that is quite important. Other than the basic parts like the floor and the walls, if I just go ahead and make all of these parts just kind of like transparent and put them out of the way, you can see really all it is these two buttons and these two buttons and the elevator part and the doors that you can't really see at the moment, but they're there. So those are the main important parts to this: the doors, the buttons, and this elevator part. So the way these buttons are set up is I have a folder called call buttons. These two buttons are the ones that call to each floor, and I have two send buttons, which are these two green buttons, which send it from one floor to the other. So if you look inside each button, I just have a click detector so that it can be clicked by the player, and then I also have a floor string value, and for one call button it's floor 1, for another one it's floor 2. Same thing over with the send buttons. I have floor 2, floor 1, and all click detectors. Moving on to the doors, I just have one called door 1 for floor 1 and door 2 for door 2. They're just like little blue glass type deals. They're just going to disappear and reappear when they're being opened and closed. And the most important part of this all is this elevator part. Now I'm going to go ahead and move it up real quick. And I'm just going to delete these attachments so you can actually watch me do it. Sort of like live. And anyway, I have a floor part, which is a little bit important, and the elevator part, which is the part that I want to move up and down. To do this, we're going to be using a Prismatic Constraint and two attachments. So what I like to do is I just like to move one up and then get in between the two and go over to Model, go over to Create, scroll down and click Attachment. And then I just plop one on there and plop one down on there. And then in the elevator part, I just hit this new button and I just put in Prismatic Constraint, like so. And attachment 0 is now going to be this one. Attachment 1 is now going to be the one that's on the same part. And now let's go ahead and run it again. Alright, that looks a lot better. This part also has to be unanchored. That's also pretty important. Let's go back into the Prismatic Constraint and change the actuator type to servo. Max force to just as much as you want. Speed to 5, and then target position like 25. And as you can see, when the target position is changed, it moves to a greater or this constraint will become bigger or smaller at a speed according to the speed. So if I change this back to like 0, it'll move down, and if I move it back to 25, it'll go back up. If I set the speed to something high, like 25, and then I set it back to 0, it goes very fast. If I set it to 150, it'll just be almost instantaneous, like so. It even has a little bit of bounce, which I like, because it just kind of whoop. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I'm going to go ahead and move our elevator part back down. And I'm going to be changing the Prismatic Constraint to the servo on the actuator type. Max force, just put 9s. Speed, I like to put like 8 is a good number. and then leave the target position at 0 so it stays there. And that's it for how this is all set up. I'm gonna go ahead and take these parts and make them back into so that it's not transparent again. And now we're going to be working on the script. So in server script service, it's just one script. I'm going to be inserting a script. I'm going to call it elevator. And it's just one script. It's called elevator, and I just put it into the server script service. And we're going to start off by localizing our objects. So stuff like the elevator part, the buttons, the door, stuff like that. So I'm going to start with the elevator part. Local elevator part equals game workspace that however you have it set up. Then the prismatic constraint within that part, the two doors, and then door 2, and then local call buttons. Remember, I made a folder and I put both call buttons into there. That kind of organizes both of them, and I don't have to have one for both. I guess I could do that with the doors too, but I just didn't for this one specifically. I didn't think to do that. And that's it for that part. Next, I'm going to put out a sort of a starting properties. This is just describing how it's going to look by default before anything happens. I start with the prismatic constraint target position. Since I want it to start at the 0 position, I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna deliberately declare it at 0. I'm also gonna keep the door 1 transparency at 1 because I want it to be completely open, and the can collide to false so people can walk through it, and do the opposite with the door 2. Next thing I'm going to be doing is using some elevator variables or values, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be calling a state, and this state is going to be changing. It's going to start out on floor 1, but when it's moving, it's going to be called moving, and when it's on floor 2, it's going to be called floor 2, and that helps the script keep track of where the elevator is, so it doesn't do any unnecessary executing of any code. I'm also going to declare where each position is, just so that if I change it later, it's easy to access. That is a good practice to do. I already know that it's 27 from testing it. 27 brings it right up to here, but if I were to ever play with this and change it, I would be just changing this number instead of changing it down here in the code. So that's easy. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to be scripting inside of the as far as the elevator is the call buttons, which are the red buttons right here, the 2 red buttons. So since there's 2 of them, I'm going to do a for loop and run it on the children of the call buttons folder. So it's going to look like this: for key value in pairs call buttons get children do. where the value is the button, the iteration. Every iteration, the value will be the button in question. So the first time it'll be button 1, the second time it'll be button 2, and that just allows us to write code one time, and it'll do it for all the buttons, which are, there's 2 of them. There's only 2, but it's nice to write code once, even if it's only going to be used twice, instead of just writing it once and then copying it. So I'm going to take that button, which is the value, the click detector inside, and the mouse click event is what I'm looking for. And then when that happens, I want to connect it with this function. Inside this function, we're going to go right off the bat with an if statement, which says if the state does not equal the value dot floor dot value, and the state does not equal moving, then. So if the state does not equal the value, so inside the button we have the floor value, floor 2. So if it were on floor 2 and you hit call, it would say, okay, the state does not equal, which is, it's currently floor 1. It doesn't equal floor 2, so that's good. And the state also doesn't equal moving because it's not already moving. So we're all good there. And then it can continue. Change the state right away to moving. And I put a wait 1.5 before I do anything. So once the button is pressed, it still gives like 1.5 seconds before doing anything. That kind of helps with players getting in and out, giving them time to gives players time to get in and out. If value that floor that value is equal to floor 1, then prismatic constraint dot target position equals floor 1 position. So if it's being called to floor 1, it will be sent to floor 1. If it's floor 2, it's going to be sent to floor 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. And that's the end of that. That's the end of the call buttons. So next is the send buttons, which are similar. I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this and paste it here. So right off the bat, the first difference is we're not dealing with the call buttons anymore. We're dealing with the send buttons. And the if statement right off here is we're not looking for a different floor value or a different, if we're not moving. We're just looking if the state is equal to the value of that same floor. So if you hit the button on floor 1, this will only run if the elevator, if you click this send button, it'll only work if the elevator is right here. If that's up there, it's not going to work. Right? So only here it's if it's not, here if it is. State, again, change the moving, wait 1.5. If the value equals floor 1, then instead of moving it to floor 1, it's just going to be kind of the inverse. It's going to be floor 2. If it's floor 2, it's going to be moving to floor 1. Alright. The next thing we need to do is we actually need to update the doors every time the elevator moves. So right here, I'm going to call a new function update doors, and I'm going to give it 2 parameters for now, which I'm going to be calling false and false. And I'm going to be copying that for every time the elevator gets moved. And now, this one is pretty straightforward. Every time this is called, we're going to write function update doors 1, 2. If 1 is equal to false, then door 1 transparency equals 0.6. Door 1 that can collide equals true. Else, it's going to be the opposite. And then same thing for door 2. Just copy it. If 2 equals false, door 2. Alright, so now we have a function that every time the elevator is moving, we call this function, and it's gonna close these doors. The last function we need is something I called wait for elevator. So what it's gonna wait for the elevator to finish getting to where it needs to be, then opens the correct door. So function wait for elevator, and then the floor name, the expected floor name. So here when it's being called to floor 1, I'm going to wait for elevator, and the expected floor it's supposed to travel to is floor 1. And then over here, same thing, except floor 2. And then here, when it's being sent, when it's on floor 1 and it's being sent, as expected, elevator is floor 2. And then here's the inverse, floor 1. Alright, now time to actually write this function. It's really simple. We just need to write a couple of variables right off the bat. Local moving equals true. This is kind of a boolean that we'll use later. Local first position and local second position. Now we're gonna kind of go back and forth between the first position and the second position, and we're gonna see if there's a difference between the two. And if there's a difference between the two, that means the elevator part is still moving. If they're the same, that means the elevator stopped moving and there's no more moving, so we set moving to false, and then we can continue. So it's going to look like this. While moving, do. So moving right off the bat is true. So this is going to run right away. First position is equal to elevator part dot position. Then we wait 0.25, so we're going to go 25 seconds later in the future, so to speak, and then we're going to get the second position. Then we say if first position is equal to second position, then that means the elevator part is no longer moving because its position didn't change. So moving equals false. So when the elevator gets called, update doors goes through, wait for elevators goes through, this is gonna start moving, and every 0.25 seconds it's getting 2 new positions, and it's comparing them. So when it's moving here, it says, okay, it's not the same as it was 0.25 seconds ago. Then it goes here, it's like, okay, it wasn't the same, here it wasn't the same. But then after it's been here for a maximum of a quarter of a second, 0.25 seconds, it's like, okay, it's been the same, first position equals second position. We're gonna say moving equals false. Once moving equals false, this is no longer gonna work because this is while moving equals true. So lastly, we're just gonna use our parameter to figure stuff out. If floor is equal to floor 1, update doors again, making the first one true and the second one false. So this is the first door, second door, and also change the state, which is important. So we've changed the state back to floor 1 because we don't want to keep it saying moving, and we want to update doors where floor 1 is true, floor 2 is false. And then else if floor is equal to floor 2, again we just do the inverse. Update doors, false on the first one, true on the second. State equals floor 2. And that's the end of that. That's the entire script. Let's go ahead and see if it works. Let's make sure I typed it right. Here I'm on the second floor. Elevator is currently on the first floor and its state is floor 1. I'm going to click this button right here to call it. And it is working. Door opens. This door closes. I'm going to click this green button. I should send it, which it does. And the door opens. Nice. I'm going to send it with me not in it, so I stay on the first floor and it goes up. It's going to open the second door. I'm going to call it back down and it's going to close. It's going to move back and it looks like it works pretty flawlessly. So this has been a nice elevator. It's nice and smooth because it uses a prismatic constraint. It's not like it updates the position every point some seconds. It just a complete smooth movement. Nothing wrong with it. Looks really nice. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to see anything in specific or have any questions, just let me know. And for now, that's all I have. See you in the next video.